To get people excited about Boost Mobile's new nationwide 5G network, we're offering unlimited talk, text, and data for $25 a month.
Forever.
Even if you have a baby.
Even if your baby has a baby.
Even if you grow old and wrinkly and you start repeating yourself.
Even if you start repeating yourself.
Even if you're on your deathbed and you need to make one last call.
Or text.
Right, or text the long-lost son you abandoned at birth.
You'll still get unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month with Boost Mobile.
Forever!
After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.
Forever.
Imagine relying on a dozen different software programs to run your business, none of which are connected, and each one more expensive and more complicated than the last. It can be pretty stressful. Now, imagine Odoo. Odoo has all the programs you'll ever need, and they're all connected on one platform. Doesn't Odoo sound amazing? Let Odoo harmonize your business with simple, efficient software that can handle everything for a fraction of the price. Sign up today at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
Hello and welcome to day 30 of 31 Days of Terror, and today's story comes from Nikita, and this is a story that I missed. So Nikita, I apologise. She contacted me and said, hey, I emailed you my story and you didn't read it, and you're right, I didn't. I apologise. So today's story comes from Nikita. When I was 5 years old, I had my first brush with the otherworldly. We were living in a smaller house then and didn't have a guest room. When my Aunt Tammy came to visit, she had to sleep on the floor in my father's office. She was my favourite relative, as she always brought me toys and played with me and paid me so much attention. Unmarried and with no children of her own, she always treated her nieces and nephews like her own children and spoiled us wonderfully. Of course, I insisted on sleeping on the floor next to her. We made things up nicely with plenty of blankets and pillows, and the floor in the office was carpeted. As I was only 5, I usually slept on the floor of my parents' room on a little mat anyway, so I wasn't fussed at all. There were 2 windows in my father's office, one directly in front of me and one caddy corner to that. Both windows faced our backyard and had blinds, but they were drawn. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to a bright light and the feeling of being watched. Outside of the window stood a figure, very tall and very bright. Its whole body was glowing. It didn't seem to be wearing clothes, and the most distinct thing about it was its big, black, almond-shaped eyes. It stood watching me, with one hand on the window. I was half sat up, having been looking to see why there was such a bright light in my face in the middle of the night. As I realised there was an alien watching me, I sat frozen in fear. I couldn't fathom what I was supposed to do. Why was it watching me? What did it want with me? Was it going to take me? Was it going to hurt me? Oddly, I think a part of me knew somehow that it wouldn't hurt me, like somehow I could feel that it was just curious. But I was still the most afraid I'd ever been. Heart pounding, I squeezed my eyes shut and shifted to lay down and pull my covers over my head. My family was very religious, and at the time so was I. I prayed and I prayed until I passed out. I woke up in the morning to the safety of daylight and my family members awake down the hall. I clambered out of my blankets and ran to tell them what had happened. None of them believed me, of course. But I know what I saw, and I know it wasn't a dream. 2 years later, we moved to a much bigger house in a much nicer neighbourhood. My parents still live at this house, and it feels like a member of our family at this point. But we all agreed it was haunted from the start. One room in the house in particular seemed full of malice. There are 4 bedrooms upstairs, and the bedroom next to the master seems to have something dark or angry that occupies the closet. Every other room in the house envelops me in a warm hug, but this room has always made all of us uneasy. My brother was given this room first, but quickly decided he couldn't sleep in it, and so it was given to me. At first I assumed he was just being a spoiled brat. But then I couldn't sleep. For years, I was awake until around 4 a.m. when exhaustion would finally claim me. Just sitting, with the anxious dread of terror that I felt in that room. It's impossible to explain. The only truly unexplainable thing that ever happened to me in that room was that a few times I heard voices whispering to each other. I'm aware that when we're tired, the brain can play tricks on us. But one thing I know about myself, I know when I'm awake and when I'm dreaming. I know when I've experienced exploding head syndrome versus when I've actually heard a noise. I've always been a light sleeper, waking easily at any odd shift or sound. The voices were never dreams or sleep paralysis, which thankfully I've never suffered from. Oddly, there always seemed to be a man and a woman arguing, and often they would reference my family as if they were aware of us. So I know it wasn't my parents. Sometimes the voices were so clear. I was convinced someone was breaking in, but I was far too scared to check until the morning. I never found anything. A few times I heard knocking inside my father's closet that would stop when I opened the closet door. Once or twice the hangers in there swayed of their own accord when I was hanging up his clothes. Not the hangers on the rack that I was using, mind you. Hangers across from me on a shelf that I couldn't even reach. At this, I simply left the room and decided my father could hang up his own laundry. Then I went to college. I am a proud graduate of Flagler College in St. Augustine. The main buildings of the college were originally a very grand, very ornate, very beautiful, very expansive hotel, commissioned and owned by railroad tycoon Henry Flagler. The main hotel building was and is girls-only dormitories with 4 floors. However, only 3 floors were open to the public or students or anyone. The 4th floor was sealed off. A ballroom was up there and was allegedly deemed unsafe, but we all knew it was haunted. Rumour had it that Henry Flagler had a mistress who fell pregnant, and during construction of the hotel, Flagler's wife had her murdered and her body sealed up in the building on the 4th floor by her own lover. My room had been on the 2nd floor, but my closest friends were on the 3rd floor. Often when I would visit them, we would hear footsteps above us on the 4th floor and nearly shit ourselves every time. At first, we would sneak up the staircase to shine a flashlight inside the window of the ballroom door, figuring we'd catch someone messing around in there. We never saw anything but dust, and we always found the door locked. Eventually, we stopped looking. My roommate, Katie, was a senior when I was a freshman. She told me that her freshman year she'd been assigned to a room on the 3rd floor. One night during her first week of school, all the doors on the 3rd floor had flung open at once. The girls had all looked out into the hallway, and some even tried to accuse each other of playing some sort of prank. But the truth was, no one could have pulled all the doors open at once, and they all knew it. After college, I moved to Grafton in Massachusetts. I was beyond excited to live in the mountains of New England. The house I would be living in belonged to my Aunt Tammy, but as she was working as a live-in nanny closer to Boston, I would essentially have the house to myself. I loved the mountains, and I loved New England, and I loved Grafton's small town charm. I spent my weekends driving through the rural mountainous countryside. I cooked all my own meals. I took walks every day in the constant rain. I found a peaceful, pleasant job working as a receptionist at a doctor's office. I was living the postgraduate dream. But the house didn't seem to feel the same. When I was alone, I would hear scratching inside the walls of the house. I told myself it was squirrels, but I had grown up in an all-wood house in a heavily wooded area and never had such a problem before. One night I came home to a fully constructed beehive in front of the door and I couldn't get inside. I always came and went from the same door and no such hive had been there when I left. How on earth had something so large been constructed in less than 10 hours? A week later I was laying in bed trying to sleep and I noticed a spider on the ceiling. Then another. Then another. There were 4 spiders, one at each corner of the ceiling. Slowly they started to move towards the middle of the ceiling and right over me. What the fuck, I thought. Spiders were a horrible problem in Florida where I had grown up. but I'd never seen them behave like this. When they all converged into one spot over me and then dropped onto the sheets, I screamed and ran downstairs. I didn't know what else to do. I slept in my aunt's room for a week. Not long after, a family of rats suddenly appeared and promptly died in the house, leaving an awful stench in the walls as summer set in. Hornets nested in the chimney. Things like that happened so often, I became good friends with the night shift employees at the hardware store down the road. I swear the house was trying to murder me. Finally, I moved back home to take care of my parents, who are both disabled. And that's when things got interesting. One night when I was cleaning up the kitchen, the door from the backyard to the Florida room flew open with no warning. This is not a screen porch door. This is a real heavy wooden door that was fully closed. There was no storm outside or heavy wind to push the door open. I stood there, stunned for a moment. Something was in my home. But I'd read enough mythology to know the rules. It was asking for hospitality, and I was obligated to play host. But if I played my cards right, I could use this to my advantage. "You're welcome to stay," I told whatever this thing was as I closed the door and locked it. "The couch is there and you're welcome to rest. But if you stay, you must behave. You must abide by the rules of the house. You cannot hurt any of us or attach to any of us, and you must remember you are a guest in our home." I knew words weren't enough. All the stories I'd read said my guest had to eat or drink our food to be bound by these rules. It seemed silly at the time, but all I had was apple juice. I poured it a glass and left it on the counter. "This is for you. Help yourself and make yourself at home." I decided to give it some privacy and left the room to start some laundry. When I came back, I shit you not, there was apple juice all over the counter. Mildly freaked out, I cleaned the mess and then went to bed. And then it started. At first, it was small. I felt something watching me in the bathroom. All of my things would get knocked off their different shelves or hooks in the shower. My favourite clothes or jewellery would go missing. "Adrian," I would sigh. I don't know why I started calling him Adrian, it just felt like that was his name. "Please don't do that." He would always listen, and the shenanigans would stop right away. I started to realise that if I was missing something and I asked Adrian very politely if he could help me find it, it would usually appear right on top of my bed covers or my laundry basket not long after. So I decided the ghost and I were friends. One day my father was rooting through all of his desk drawers in frustration. "I've lost a cheque and I can't figure out how." "Just call whoever wrote it and have them cancel it, then write you a new one." "Well, that's a bit embarrassing," my father grumbled. "Besides, I know I had it. Did you try asking Adrian?" "Who?" My father had no idea what on earth I was talking about. "Adrian. He's the ghost that lives with us. He's my friend. He helps me find things sometimes. If you just ask him, he might be able to help you." My father looked at me like I had finally flown the coop. "You're serious?" He was trying not to laugh. Shrugging, I grabbed my purse and headed towards the garage. Ask him or don't, but he really does like to help. When I came back from work, my father was sitting in his office. "You'll never guess what I found." "The cheque?" "Yeah, I tried it. I asked your little spirit guide for help. Came back an hour later and I swear the cheque was sat right in the middle of the drawer, on top of everything." "I told you," I laughed. "Thanks, Adrian." That's the only rule, I think. He gets a little bit offended if you don't say thank you. "Thanks, Adrian." My dad was so happy. He would have thanked the devil if I told him to. The latest story in my adventures is by far my favourite. Every year I take a trip to a new city as a birthday present to myself. Being unmarried and without children at 35, this is the life I always wanted for myself. Unbeholden to anyone, travelling, cosmopolitan. Last year I took my dream trip to Chicago. I'd been dying to go to Chicago my entire life, and every second of the trip exceeded my expectations beyond anything I could have imagined. I stayed in a beautiful artist's loft just north of the Chicago River. The first afternoon of my arrival, I was settling in and absolutely falling in love with the place. It was an Airbnb made from what seemed to be a very old house. With 3 floors, every room had its own assigned bathroom, but not every bathroom was connected to its assigned room. My bathroom, for example, was all the way down the hall. However, it was the biggest and nicest bathroom, so I didn't mind. Excited to shower and settle in, I stripped down to my bathrobe and padded down the hallway. But the door was locked. Strange, I thought. This is my private bathroom. Maybe the other guests here don't realise this one is mine? I tried the handle again just to make sure. It was definitely locked. As I tugged the curtain on the door aside, I realised the windows on the door were fogged up with steam. In fact, I realised a moment later that I could hear the shower running and see that the light was on. Mortified, I padded back to my room, deeply worried that some other guests here now thought I was a peeping Tom, and we now had to share the accommodations for a week. Fantastic. Sitting in my room, I texted the host and politely asked if she could help me with this. I figured it was an innocent misunderstanding and we could all just have a quick chat about it. I'm a frightfully polite person, but I also desperately needed to use the bathroom. Very soon after, the host came knocking on my door. He walked me down the hallway with a cheerful smile. "You have the bathroom to yourself. It's completely yours. I promise." "Thank you," I offered him a polite smile, "but the door is locked and someone is using the shower in there. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, but I was hoping you could help me talk to the other guest and let them know this bathroom is from my room." We got to the end of the hallway, where I'd been standing not 3 minutes previously. He opened the door with no trouble at all, and there was no steam or light coming from inside. "You're the only person checked in right now. There are no other guests in the entire building." Okay, because now I regret going back and redoing this story when I skipped it. I should have stayed skipped, you know? We had just gotten through 31 days of terror without a terrifying alien story. We had just about made it. We had 1 day left without an alien story that was going to keep me awake at night. I mean, I'm glad your alien was curious and not, going to eat you or abduct you or whatever else aliens do. But still, could it not be curious? Could it be curious from a distance, not standing at your window, looking in at you in the middle of the night? That did not make me feel good. I mean, I'm glad you weren't abducted and it seemed to have just ended at curiosity, but still not great. And isn't it funny how these dark, angry spaces often seem to occupy closets? I'm aware that there was a setup here for some sort of coming out of the closet joke, but that's actually not where I was going. Where I was going is, why do these dark, angry spaces always seem to occur, or often seem to occur, in these dark enclosed spaces? Is it about it being a dark enclosed space? That it feels contained, whatever it is contained within it? And the whispering voices are really interesting because that is something that comes up regularly in stories that are sort of akin to like time slips, where people hear parties going on or voices shouting at each other or whispering to each other. Maybe whatever was in the house was aware of you guys in some sort of the others type situation. And as for the rich ballroom place, I mean, listen, rich people be getting up to all sorts, all right? Like, and I mean rich people, like real rich people, disgusting rich people. They be getting up to all sorts. Who knows what kind of angry spirits are knocking around in that ballroom, or knocking around in that building full stop. I mean, clearly it wanted to make itself known by, stomping around up there, but also throwing all the doors open at once. And that house in New England, I mean, it sounds really idyllic. Also, maybe it was just a magnet for whatever animals were around. Maybe it had like a really positive energy for nature, which can only be a good thing, right? And I will welcome a ghost into my house if it is going to be like Adrian. If it will listen, if you just say, "Adrian, give it a rest. Don't do that. Adrian, can you find my check?" I would accept that into my life. It would sort of be like having a bit of a shit PA. There's definitely a sitcom in there somewhere. And finally, your final story about the bathroom. Again, it's something that comes up quite regularly. Clearly, hygiene is a big deal in the afterlife, because we often have stories of people who hear somebody get into the shower, turn the shower on, they see the steam, they see the lights on, whatever it is. Like clearly hygiene in the afterlife is a top priority. Nikita, I loved these stories. Thank you so much for sending them in. And thank you for listening to 31 Days of Terror, day number 30. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
The new Boost Mobile network is offering unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month for life.
That sounds like a threat.
Then how do you think we should say it?
Unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month for the rest of your life?
I don't know.
Until your ultimate demise.
What if we just say forever?
Okay.
$25 a month, forever.
Get unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month with Boost Mobile forever.
After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.